Okay, welcome to the EDIC meeting on Tuesday, the 18th of August, 2020. I am going to begin by acknowledging that this meeting is being conducted remotely, and I'm going to read this statement because we still have to do that, is my understanding. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Easthampton Development and Industrial Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. We will post a record of this meeting on the city website as soon as we're able. A recording will be available via Easthampton Media. So, the EDIC's mission, as ever, is to support and enhance the economic environment for current and future businesses, residents, and the community at large. I'm Gwen Morrissey. Josh, are you continuing to be willing to take some notes for our minutes? Thank you, sir. So if you're not speaking, I invite you to turn your audio to mute. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, for our agenda, approve. Oh, here we go. We have two people coming on right now. Both Casey and Dave Boyle. Great. So we're going to approve our July 21st, 2020 meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Okay, great. Welcome, Dave. Welcome, Casey. Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes from Josh. So because this is a remote meeting, we need to get a roll call vote. So I'm going to go in order of how I see you on my screen, and you can tell me yay or nay. Okay. So Dave and Casey, I will either need to be able to hear you or to see you for that.
Can you hear me?
I can. You can hear me. This is great.
Okay.
And Dave, you can hear me as well?
He's
You're muted. Well, we'll wait on Dave. Okay. Do we have a second of the motion to approve the minutes?
So seconded, Chris.
Okay, so Josh moved, Chris seconded, super duper. Josh, wait a minute, what am I saying?
How good a job I did on the minutes.
Right. So if you're in favor of approving the July 21st, 2020 meeting minutes, Josh, you say aye.
Yes, aye.
Gwen says aye. Chris?
Aye.
Tom?
Yes.
Bo?
Yes.
Thank you. Cassie?
Aye.
Paul?
I cannot vote on the minutes because I was not
Okay.
last meeting.
All right, so that's an abstention. David?
Aye.
Thank you. And Casey?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. So I would say we've adequately approved them. Public speak. There isn't anybody here from the public, but Casey shared with me that he was interested in sharing a thought. Casey, I added to our agenda a discussion item about possible coordination with the ECA regarding grants for public art and music. Do you have other things that you would like to comment on that aren't related to that?
No.
Okay,
No.
so we'll wait for that then. So I shared with you all a letter of support for the downtown business permitting amendment that City Council is going to take into consideration tomorrow evening at their City Council meeting that begins at 6 o'clock. I didn't get any feedback on it, so I am interested in getting some indication that we approve that so that we can send it to City Council as our show of support. So can I get a motion to approve?
I would move to approve the letter as written.
Second, Chris.
Chris seconded. Any further discussion?
Nice letter, I thought.
Oh, thank you. Great. All right, so then we're going to move forward. If you are in favor of the letter of support for the downtown business permitting amendment, I'm going to go in the order that I see you and ask you to say yay or nay, or that you abstain. So Josh.
Yay, I approve.
Yay, I do too. I'm Gwen. Chris.
Approve. Aye.
Okay, Tom.
Yes.
Mo.
Yay.
Cassie.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Dave.
Yep.
And Casey.
Yes.
Great. Oh, here's Jeff Bagg. I will admit him presently. Okay. Welcome, Jeff Bagg. We have just approved the EDIC letter of support for the downtown business permitting amendment. So I will get that off of my desk, off of my desktop this very evening. So City Council has it. So next on our agenda is to discuss some highlights and some of our main takeaways and our little points of interest from last month's Housing Study Needs Assessment presentation at the joint meeting with the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. I shared out that presentation. I apologize, Cassie, for not being able to get that to you in a way that you could access. So would anybody like to share some of their primary takeaways or really interesting points that you want to press on and bring up to the group for consideration?
Well, I don't know if it's something that could be brought up for consideration, but something that struck me from the presenter was that she said if she were a developer looking at our zoning, she would be astounded. Just one second.
Sure.
You gotta be quiet. And another thing that she said that struck me was our parking regulations were very onerous, she thought. And I thought that's a good project to get moving on. Seems simple. Seems like low-hanging fruit, I guess is the right phrase.
Gwen, I think overall, I don't know, and maybe Jeff can answer this when I'm through with just a few comments, but I'm not sure what stage they are with this study, but it looked pretty comprehensive at this point. She went into a lot of demographic and income information. A lot of that probably dovetails with the UMass study that the Council on Aging did a couple of years ago. No surprise, we have a declining aging population. That's probably true of most of Massachusetts. And I think Jeff brought up a point during the meeting because at one point it seemed to be heavily focused on affordable housing, but Jeff brought up the point, I think, that at the end of the day, this study will be an overview of all forms of housing, not just focused on affordable, but potentially looking at single-family homes and multi-family homes and apartments and what have you, all ranges of housing. I thought it was interesting of some of the site studies they're looking at. 385 Main Street, 9397 Northampton Street, Irving and Church Street, and the church property on Pleasant Street, as possibilities for potential housing in the future. And to dovetail with what Chris said, Judy actually had a slide that said something like city zoning ordinances, 238 pages, yikes. Like she's never, I mean, to me, Jeff, that was it's always good when you can have an outside, disinterested third party sort of take a look in your kitchen. And Judy really was overwhelmed, as Chris said, by the volume of our zoning ordinances, and as a deterrent, if you will, to development. So I think to Chris's point, that's something that, like a charter review committee, I would hope there could be something down the road that could take a real hard look at our zoning. That was a nutshell for me. But it was great. It was a great presentation and a great report thus far. I'm assuming it's not completed yet, Jeff, but it was a great presentation and great report.
Yeah, just in terms of where, yeah, the process, of all the many projects that are ongoing right now, this one definitely slowed down a little bit due to COVID. And I think we're ramping back up. Amy and I had a meeting with Judy Barrett yesterday just to check in. So what you saw in that initial presentation was the slides for the housing needs assessment. And so there's an accompanying report for that. And then that's forthcoming. And then there's if you took the project and put it into two big buckets, it's the affordable housing plan. That's like the HPP. And then there's kind of all the other comprehensive housing, the market rate things. So the Barrett Group is really working on that first component for the affordable housing. But as you would imagine, the data will serve both purposes. So the data gathering was the initial phase. If you, and I'll formalize this in an email as soon as we're waiting to hear back from Judy on a final schedule, but if you penciled in a date, what we're targeting now is that September 24th. Double check that. Yeah, as of right now, the next kind of informational update and session will be, we're looking at September 24th is the housing partnership meeting. And so I'll formalize this through this group, but that could be another opportunity for it to be even a joint meeting to attend as Judy goes through the completed kind of housing needs assessment and the housing production plan. Because what we talked about yesterday was the housing production plan needs to be reviewed and voted upon by city council. So we charted out a rough timeline for either the city council meeting on October 7th or October 21st as the date when city council, and I think it would also pile on with the planning board, those two bodies formally have to vote on the housing production plan. But I think it would be, I'll put together an email with the timeline, but that would take care of that first chunk of the project, which is the housing production plan. And then it really frees up the Barrett Group to then dig in more on what this group I know is interested in, is kind of removing barriers to housing development. So that's kind of the zoning review. And then we don't want to just identify the barriers, but we want to identify solutions. So some of the parcels that Tom mentioned, look at if there's zoning tools that we should look at applying to some of these parcels to make it easier. And then in that latter bucket is the accessory dwelling units. So I know that's a big component of, a solution for us, at least at some level, to provide more housing. So mid-October, we would get the housing production plan kind of hopefully out of the way. And then it would free us up to work through sort of late fall, possibly into the winter with that last component, just in terms of a big picture timeline. That's kind of what we're looking at for the rest of the project. So, I think that the presentation was good. I think it was the slide versions. So the narrative should help explain a lot of what was in those. And that was the part that I know, I was kind of catching up and trying to absorb stuff, and, the written explanation will be helpful. And I think once we have that, then we'll really want to start pushing out information to the broader public about the plan. So yeah, looking at zoning is going to be a key part of this in terms of housing. And I think we should kind of stay focused on that, because that's been what has been a topic for quite a while here in this group. And then maybe we start to look at the whole zoning ordinance overall, because I think it can be really overwhelming. It's not easy to just say, let's overhaul the zoning ordinance, because obviously you get mixed up with everything. But yeah, I heard it as well. Parking, length, yikes, like if you think about it from a business perspective, what can we do? And I'm sure you guys talked about this a little bit about kind of streamlining some of the permitting for businesses, and we're taking a stab at that with the downtown. So overall, it's a little slower than probably would have hoped for this study, but it is going to ramp up again.
Jeff, with the zoning overhaul, how, in your perfect world, how would you see that done? In one fell swoop where it's done properly, or a slow, steady fixing of problems and adding amendments to other problems, and just, that seems like it might overcomplicate the zoning document.
Yeah, you know, I'm like, I'm in my third year, believe it or not, working with you guys and working in Easthampton, and I kind of remember my interview. We are finally looking at expanding the planning department a little bit with a new person. We got funded through the budget, and what's making, yeah, that was a big lift. But what we're I'm currently interviewing for that position, and that's what's making me think of this is, you know, I got questions when David, I think you were there, you know, the zoning overhaul. We are currently doing the second version, which is chipping away, and it's necessary because we find stuff that needs to be fixed, but the comprehensive overview would be one fell swoop, but you know, there is a huge dollar figure to that. By no means could I do it, or even with an additional staff person. It's something that most municipalities, when they do it, they bring in a professional consultant to help, because it's an overwhelming task, and the dollar figures are huge, you know, like $50, $75, $100,000 to do it the right way, which I think it's going to be a little bit tricky with where we are with COVID and all the things happening, but I'm still committed to that idea, because I think more and more the downtown strategic plan talked about we need to amend probably the smart growth overlay district to start to get kind of things that we want. This housing study is going to say, you know, we're going to need to make X, Y, and Z changes related to housing. And even looking back at the highway business district, you know, there's a 2013 document that kind of outlines some of the stuff that should be looked at. And it's really kind of just amassing all of that and trying to get it done. So this group, I would just ask a little patience from this group, because you guys pushed me pretty hard on the housing, and we're still making that happen. So, you know, I think it's worthwhile to have on the list. And
I guess the reason I asked the question, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know, if you have things that you want to chip at, but you don't have the resources to chip at, maybe we could chip at it. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn and giving work to the committee that it doesn't want, but I mean, it's something the committee could discuss anyway.
Well, sorry, Chris. The only thing, and I was hoping Jeff was going to say that, and again, this is not a shot at Jeff, because these 238 pages were in existence long before Jeff was born, probably. So it's just an example of how a city piles zoning, just piles it on, and piles it on. And I was hoping, you know, the breath of fresh air here with Judy was an outside professional taking a look at our zoning real quick and saying, holy cow, this is way too complicated for a city like Easthampton into 2020. So Jeff, I'm glad to hear that we might have that objective third party outsource, if you will, taking a look at this zoning, knowing what it probably should look like in the finished product, and trying to drag us to that finished product. If it's $75,000 or $100,000, that just has to be a goal we have to try to get to, and maybe the financial institutions in town and others help contribute towards that.
yeah,
Well, you know, the only problem though is with the $75,000, $100,000 model is, I don't like that anymore, because not because of the costs, but we're going to get bogged down with public input. And I don't mean to be untransparent, but as soon as you start having public outreach, we've had enough studies, enough consultants that I think, in all honesty, if we kept the zoning districts the same, that we could rewrite the zoning without, I don't know, we're going to get bogged down. And right now, we're going to get bogged down with social justice, and other things that it's going to, and with COVID, it's going to drag it out a long time. And I don't mean to dismiss social justice and this and that, but we're just going to be in a holding pattern until we say we have to go from strategy to tactics. And at some point we got to like say, what are we going to do? And maybe we can't bite it all off at once. Maybe it has to be in $15,000 increments. I say that because maybe we'll have smaller public outreach. But like when Judy, I'm sorry I missed the meeting, but I did watch the video. And one thing I was a little surprised at, and maybe I missed it, there was no mention of city-owned land and how many acres are available. And, you know, I have no problem with the private-owned parcels being mentioned because they're certainly appropriate. But, you know, like you take the piece of land that I lease next to my house, I know, for example, I know that land very well, and I know what it can support. But I know also as soon as I supported a proposal for that, I know how many restless natives would come out and attacking me immediately because of their parochial interests, and we need to move past that. And because COVID, one thing I think about COVID is whatever scars it leaves, we have to be even more nimble than we are now.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway. And I think to Chris's point, I mean, I would just encourage you to hang in there I we are going to have tasks that come out of this housing study that the group has been talking about for a while. And I would consider parking important, but like the low hanging fruit is going to be the accessory dwelling units. And so just to recall that what I think is really important is that we'll have some data, and that's something that we didn't have before. And so the data driven, it will help us kind of quickly accomplish the accessory dwelling units. And then I think we are going to be tasked with looking at the other zoning tools or changes that we need to support housing. And then we do have the elementary schools, you know, that are going to come up quick. So there will be things that we need to do collectively as a city to be preparing. And so it might seem like nothing's happening, but we're in that planning stage, and then it'll be kind of going from strategies to tactics, I think, pretty quick, actually. So
don't get me wrong. I don't think nothing's happening. I'm not insinuating that at all.
No,
I know how much is going on.
And if I could just jump back to Dave's point, Dave, maybe I was being real naive about this, but I guess I figured, I was assuming we hand somebody a check for X and they come back with a finished product that says, here you go, and we get it approved. I agree with you. The last thing we want to do is take a 238-page zoning ordinance and have it come back as 298 pages. So I actually envisioned this being done in a vacuum, and I understand transparency and all of that, and then coming back saying, based on other models in the Commonwealth, this is what we would recommend that your zoning should look like. If you want to tweak it, go ahead, but don't tweak it to add another 100 pages or what have you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny, about 10 years ago, Northampton went through a little bit of a painful process with some of their rezoning, but once they got that done, ever since then, they've done like a behind-the-scenes chip-away process. It's a lot less transparent than it was before. Almost to the point of, I wouldn't call it secretive, but elitist a little bit. But their zoning has been overhauled, and so maybe you have to go through the big process at first, and then get action steps, and then the action steps can be nimble and smaller afterwards. You know, I mean, if you could go on a shelf and buy, you know, pick from 1 of 5 zoning ordinances, I would love to see that.
That's my point.
I'd like to just agree with David on the fact that there are a lot of people who invest a lot of time and effort into the knowledge of this stuff, and then to bring in the public last minute and have their input when they don't really have the knowledge seems like a step back. So, I mean, I know a comprehensive plan sounds great, but I think that like things are happening with the elementary schools coming online, that we may just have to be in a position of picking and choosing items to take as they come our way. And that, you know, the time to investigate the funds, to figure out the big picture will just slow us down. And, you know, like, I think Tom and Dave have just been in the city for so long. They just know so much, and that we should look to them to sort of guide us to the future and not just let, Joe Public, who's lived in town for 3-4 years, say, well, this is what I envision.
Yeah, I would agree, Casey, because to Dave's point about people in an uproar, I mean, Jeff can speak to this better than any of us, but you're looking at a potential project on Plymouth or Colonial Avenue, you're looking at a project on Loudville Road, and everyone comes out of the woodwork and wants nothing to change. So when you get public input, everyone would want the zoning to look like nothing can be built near me.
Right.
And I believe it's something that has to be done. I totally agree with what Casey said. You start getting too much public input and it becomes more emotional than head thinking.
Well, I think that, Jeff, you're fully aware that we care a lot about what's going on with the zoning ordinance, and that's been something that has come up at almost every meeting I've been to, however many, all 24 months I've been part of this group. I don't know how long I've been doing this.
8 years.
Yeah, 100 years since the early 1900s. And I think something that's important to me, and I think to a number of us on EDIC, is having a sense of not just feeling like we offer you an opportunity in a public and simultaneously somewhat constrained way to share. Here's some of the thinking behind why this timeline is happening this way, but also to think of us as thought partners and the occasional task partners. So I think it's important to me to feel like, if, echoing Chris's initial thought, if there are things that we can be doing, I'm not saying we're going to go write zoning ordinances, but if there really are things that this group could do by reaching out to certain groups or by doing whatever, I don't know what those things are. I have no idea, but I am interested in making us available in whatever way the other members of EDIC are willing and able to be partners in action as well.
Jeff, just one other thing real quick. If we have another joint meeting, you suggested it might be September 24th with a housing partnership group. If someone, I don't know who communicates with them, Gwen, maybe, I'm not sure, but obviously they weren't prepared for the length of that presentation. And it did get a little bit frustrating when they started messaging in for everyone to see, can we move this along? Can we cut this short? I've got to get done at 8 o'clock kind of thing. I mean, we're sitting in our homes, nowhere to go. And no disrespect to those folks that might not have been prepared, but I just, maybe they need to make that the only thing on their agenda.
I agree. I think that there's something really important about meetings like ours, where you have volunteers on these committees in the first place. Let's be thoughtful about time estimates and make that clear at the outset, and have a proposed ending time, not just a start time. There should be expectations on both sides, from presenter and from audience. So.
Got it.
Are there other thoughts about the housing study needs assessment? That was a rich little conversation. I'm impressed with what Judy presented. I value the sheer scope of her knowledge across the Commonwealth. She's got an anecdote for everything, which is valuable.
I thought it was really good information. I thought it was really helpful. It's the kind of thing that's going to help us make decisions down the road. I'm very excited to see what they come back with in September. And Tom, I do agree with your point about the messaging and the let's get it moving. And it was a little bit, just yeah. So I'm with you there.
So shall we move on to other updates from City Planner Jeffrey Bagg?
Yes.
Great. Jeff, you're on. It's you. Tag.
I'm a little unprepared. I think I really do want to just confine my one update to the wayfinding project, which ironically I don't have a really solid update. So that is a project that will also kind of get jump started in the near future. we initiated the contract with the consultant, and we had the initial meeting, and then that is going to ironically involve a little public process to kind of get enough awareness that this is happening. So my expectation is that it would probably be like in October that we'll pick that back up again, involve this group, and start making some headway on that. So that's about what I have, unless there's questions.
So I would like to know, unrelated to wayfinding,
Yep.
What is the story? How did your intern situation work out, given that local post-secondary education has been very strange? And what does that future look like? But if you have more to say, or if Tom has a follow-up about wayfinding, I'm fine to continue in that.
The internship did not end in the best manner. We were kind of wrapping up right as COVID was like really getting its grip. So in like April and May would have been our winding down, and I didn't get a clear product from that first internship. So I'm going to try to chalk that up to a little bit of learning experience with an internship in general. But then just that unexpected inability to have contact or in person, it kind of was, it didn't pan out. And I would expect that given the situation now, I'll probably hold off on trying to solicit an intern until the spring probably. So there are things that, are just not happening because it's super challenging. So I apologize. It didn't, I think it was like the critical time when all my focus and efforts had to go to creating this virtual world that we're in now, while juggling, we actually have a lot of projects that are still viable. So it's just been kind of shifting the priority there.
Yeah, I think most of us consider most of spring and summer to be a no-fault season. So. Tom, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, all I was going to throw out was I wanted to commend Jeff for his videos on the various projects in town that have been out on Facebook, keeping everybody informed. Nice videos on the Ferry Street project, on the Northampton Street project, and on the new roundabout on Park Street. And I think yesterday or today, Pat Bruff and Bert Gardner from Kalo and Beanick put out a video that I think it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook. It's sort of an overview of the school project and some great aerial shots. You get a sense looking at those aerial shots of the magnitude of the new school. So thanks, Jeff, for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anybody got any other pressing questions for Jeffrey Bagg, City Planner?
No, I said no. I mean, yes. I'm sorry. As COVID meanders along, and we've all been in a period of adjustment, and we went through our no-fault zone. But I like what Jeff's been doing with those videos as well. But as you interview your potential hire, I think that's something in the back of your mind that you have to keep that some of the top 5 planner responsibilities. You might have to add one is to virtual delivery. I mean, I just don't see how, when like my kids came home from school in the spring, the colleges were punting. Hopefully over the summer, they were getting better delivery systems, but I think it's a way of life, and it's, I know some of it might cost, but some of it's a mindset too.
And do you mean, when you say virtual delivery system, do you mean this like platform by which we are holding meetings? Is that what you mean? Or
everything? I mean, yeah. Everything. All bets are off because, at some point in time, we have to figure out how to operate differently, but at the same speed, whatever speed it was that we were operating before. So,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that a lot because I think we've made a tremendous pivot and like for a municipality to go and everyone's doing it now, right?
Yeah.
By August, it's kind of been done, but we acted fast, and it has been extra work, but like the commitment for the planning board work, at least, is that all that information and documents are available online prior to the hearing and during the hearing, and then getting the meeting structured so that it's functionable on Zoom. It's a lot of learning curve, but I give everyone a lot of credit because now this group's doing it. There's only a few committees that haven't really convened virtually yet, but the amount of time and effort that it actually took, kind of behind the scenes, to get it going was a lot. And so that's kind of that's a little bit of my excuse for some of the things kind of slowing down a little bit. But I do not think this is going to change for a while. I think we're going to be in this virtual realm for quite a bit. And I do start to remind people that we're able to convene all virtually and remotely because of the emergency order, the emergency declaration from the governor. If and when they eliminate that emergency order, we will actually have some work to do as a community to take votes and formalize kind of what we see as kind of actually working pretty well in most cases is convening virtually. But I am reminding, especially a couple of boards and committees, that it doesn't automatically just happen. Like, there will be a series of votes that have to take place to formalize this once the emergency declaration is lifted. But in the interviews we're talking about, right now I'm in the office 1 day a week. So, and I have Jamie in the office 2 days a week, but I'm doing a lot of work from home. I'm doing a lot of work at odd hours and around other schedules. And it's just been a tremendous shift. And I've been working more now than I was in February. It's pretty wild.
Jeff, just so I sort of understand that, are you saying that the governor wakes up some morning and says, okay, back to normal, municipalities, you guys can all do your thing. Certain municipalities, Easthampton being one of them, might choose to continue to conduct business this way. And if they did, they would need votes by the city council to allow that?
Yeah, and to split hairs is if there could be some way to circumnavigate this so that it's not super terrible to get the proper votes. But if the planning board members did convene in town hall and allowed people to be in the building, but then Zoom or broadcast out the actual recording so people could watch it online, like, that's going to be more acceptable. What's really with the open meeting law, the trick is having board members not actually in a physical location. So that's really the thing that the governor really reduced the requirement for. So for boards to continue to remotely convene, that's what's going to take a vote. But we're building up the technology to kind of do all these meetings, stream them for the Easthampton media. So, I hate to be pessimistic, but I think we'll be under the emergency order probably all winter. So I don't think it's something that the governor's going to wake up tomorrow, because I think the variation in all these cases and what's happening is still real. But at some point, that will change. But
Jeff, I don't think that's a bad thing if it's working. So just to dovetail, if I might, with Dave's comment, the Loudville Road project, which I'm not sure if it's condos or apartments or what it is, but just real quick in a nutshell, how is that project tracking in this environment versus if we weren't in this environment?
Tracking maybe in terms of timeline, or public
process from beginning to end.
I would say it's increasing the time by like a month.
Okay.
So, as of people are going to be upset. As of right now, for the past month or two, the planning board has been meeting every single week, so as to not make these processes over elongated. Mm-hmm. So we want to give the planning board a lot of credit, because they're kind of working double time. And the commitment at the planning board was that even for a simple project, which we don't have any right now, but the planning board was a little hesitant to try to convene virtually and vote in one night, just because of the chance that someone might miss it, couldn't join. So kind of we set up this process where most projects would have at least 2 meetings. The first one where you get the bulk of the information out, and then a second one so that anyone who was interested could watch that first meeting and then come back for the second one. And it's working really well because we want to make sure that we do have a legitimate process.
Yeah, seems reasonable. It's
yeah.
reasonable.
And I think the Loudville one is just a bigger project. Like it's 18 units. So we haven't seen a bigger development like that in a while. So I think just wrapping your head around the details of that is just taking a couple meetings. But I would say, and sorry if I'm totally belaboring this, but I'm trying to be really clear and upfront with applicants. Under the same emergency order, like there are towns that are not convening, they're not making decisions, and they don't have to. So they could be really just delaying projects and not really dealing with them. And we've taken the opposite approach, which is we're going to do this. It just might take one extra meeting. So we, I'm pretty happy with the way it's been going, and applicants are understanding of that, that we're trying really hard. So I haven't heard any negative reactions about our pace.
Great.
Just one suggestion, Jeff, when you mentioned that you're in the office, 1 day a week, and I'm sure that's probably going to be that way for a while. I myself, in my situation, I'm kind of fortunate. I'm able to go to my office 5 hours a day by myself, and we've moved everything else online and virtual. But by having to be able to go in my office, though, made that a lot easier. So if at some time the city, if you could recommend the city some kind of a hybrid model where you're in the office, a little bit more, 2 days a week, floating shifts with all the other departments, because it is your office until you move it into your house is your office. And I think you're right. We're going to have a new world. I don't make any predictions, but it's probably going to be some kind of a hybrid model. And I just want to say, you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thanks. Yep. Yeah, we're working on the office. I mean, we can go to 50% capacity, but it's been a little tricky. So we're just kind of hanging low until school starts. I think that's kind of when I see the next big shift happening with, across the board with a lot of people. Yeah. People's schedules are really in flux at the moment. And come September 15th, I think people have some hard decisions to make about how they're going to handle school, including. Well, I just
pulled my 2 out from college, well, I didn't pull them out. We agreed, because they're going to school in Boston, and I think there's going to be a SHIT storm coming, and so until that's resolved, which is probably next spring. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. I think in terms of overall, things happening with the economy, I think the school year going remote is good for students. It's going to be challenging for working folks. I think. Yeah. We're not out of the woods really at all yet. So it's going to be kind of a tumultuous winter.
So we have one other known topic for our conversation. We have about 11 minutes left. Casey, would you like to lead the charge discussing? This is a follow-up from last meeting in July about possibly coordinating with ECA about grants for public art and music.
Sure. So it's kind of just an overview I see. I'm like David talking about the spring, and I appreciate Paul's efforts to try to help the restaurants and the local businesses by closing down the streets. Is that I just see this as going on for a longer period of time, and that if we could come up with the long game, that when we come out of this in the spring or early winter, that we're sort of showcasing the arts as a highlight to the city to help traffic come through the city. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot of legwork. Like, I can remember we talked about maybe a taste of Easthampton, sort of like we had for the rail trail in 2004. And that was a great day. Everybody that was involved made money for that one day. But something like the Bear Fest created a great summer. I was a sponsor for Arts in the Orchard, and that was great for me. That was really good September, October, and November because of all the people that attended that. So it's just an idea that we've sort of, as a group, come with ideas to link businesses and the public with sort of marketing Easthampton as an arts venue through whatever sources, whether or not it's visual, music, theater, done, so we're hit the ground running come the spring and summer, that we're popular. There was an article in the Boston Globe about Holyoke, and they said the affluent
I saw that.
between Easthampton and Northampton. So it's sort of like we're primed to be a showcase of the recovery of COVID. And I think the arts is the direction that could help take us there. So I just want to put that out and sort of see if other people can add to the traction. I know that ECA's first idea was to just get money to artists to produce stuff. And that's happening. That's happening well. But now we're also trying to figure out, well, how can we show this to the public? I know there was a quilt project that happened last Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago that sort of worked out well. I mean, I saw a lot of social media. And so it's like elements like that can help us open up after the recovery.
So, Casey, are you talking specifically after COVID or life or opening up with COVID? Like, because my first thought is it'd be wonderful if cultural chaos is great. And I don't see any reason why that can't be every weekend on Cottage Street, to be quite honest.
It's a lot of work.
I understand the work involved, but I think once you get rolling with a schedule like Arts Walk,
yep,
right? If you get rolling with a method and a schedule, it might be a little bit less work. And maybe, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just think that's a good way of doing it. Something like that. Because it's always a big hit. It's like the biggest hit of the summer in the city, to me anyway.
And that's what I'm saying is that sort of like there's a committee that deals with it and they do a really good job. There be more volunteers? Can there be more businesses involved? Can there be more people help sharing it on social media? That's sort of like, can we just make it a little bit bigger and better?
There's also a price tag associated with that.
Okay.
Are you talking about businesses losing car traffic, for instance?
No, I'm talking about money in order to make the day what it is. I mean, that's another conversation. But no, I'm talking specifically just to get the day to happen.
Yeah.
There's a pretty decent little price tag that goes to that.
Right, but I can tell you, Mo, that I sponsored Arts in the Orchard, $5,000. I got it back tenfold. It was really successful for me. So
I'm not denying that. I'm just adding to the conversation that's something that's involved.
And Casey, I think all of those things are great ideas. Art in the Orchards, cultural chaos, the Bear Fest, all of those things could be revived. Going back to something David said earlier, though, who the heck predicts when the end of COVID is? When you got to plan for this stuff sometimes months in advance.
Yeah, I mean, I want to add to this too, because I appreciate Casey's kind of excitement about that. And there's the shorter term things, like if there's something that can happen in the fall or early winter. But in terms of this group, and I also want to give a lot of credit to Paul for the initial thought process that went into like the restaurants. I believe it's probably a tiny bit premature right now, but if there is looking ahead to next spring and summer, and if there are thoughts or concerns that we would be in a similar situation as we were this summer, then I think we take this lead time and we start to, as this group, talk to some restaurants and business owners. I would really encourage someone with a little bit of time and energy to go out and document a few examples of the street sorry, this is where I wanted to make my point. Like the conversion of parking lots to certain things or parking spaces. Paul, I think what happened with the initial concept that hit a snag was the road closures. And I think, as you can see, there are a lot of examples of the parking spaces being converted, which I think if we try to strike a balance between keeping the flow, like Cottage and Union Street are the main thoroughfares, so I think we have an issue that's a little bit different. But I think if we built up some visual examples and showed some of the variety of what is happening around us, and I think, we kind of missed some opportunities this summer, and there didn't seem like there was a lot of support. I think there was a lot of confusion and just uneasiness. But now and through the winter would be a pretty good time to be thinking about options for spring and summer. And my concern just would be that I don't want to like freak anyone out, business owners. But if we start to see projections that this is going to happen again in the spring and summer, then we might have a little bit more lead time to come up with like some locations where we barrier off the parking and expand the sidewalks. And I think that would kind of bode well with what Casey's talking about, is getting more room for people to walk around, and then the programming around that and getting people with seats and stuff outside. So where we might have not gotten a lot of traction initially, I think we have some time to look. And it's sad and it's unfortunate that if we are starting to look next spring, like what does it look like? Do we want to try to talk to some business owners throughout the winter to help them formulate a plan to go back outside in spring and summer? I think we may be doing that. I think we may be looking ahead a whole nother summer.
And Jeff, I think that's a good idea, because that's the pessimistic view, and that's the view I share too. But from the optimistic standpoint, if it turns out that, say, we get a vaccine in January, right, and it's rolled out by spring, then we're already ready for what Casey is saying, to hit the ground running with that space and planning and that infrastructure built up to just get Easthampton on the map as like the place to go, because we're ready for the alternative. Yeah. So either way, it's a good thought.
Is it worth creating different models for different scenarios now in the more immediate future? Say, life is like it is now, life is worse like it was in April, and life is great like it used to be, and then come up with different things we'd want to do, develop the implementation plans, so once we approach those times, we'd be ready to roll. We were talking about some relatively simple stuff to do in August, but lead time, and having to think of the implementation. So if we were going to lay the groundwork, we'd be ready to move quickly.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, if we get a Venn diagram of pessimism and optimism and just work on that area, so no matter what happens, we're ready with increased street space for maybe outdoor dining. And if not, then that could be the Arts Walk Center or something, whatever,
But, along with one of Casey's minor points, maybe this committee just needs to reach out to ECA and the mill owners on Pleasant Street, just for a simple reason of communication and contact as this moves along, so that everyone's not in a vacuum, and maybe we can get to a point where we have some plans, and then we just have to wait to pull the trigger.
So if I may, thank you, Jeff, for saying that. And I think it is unfortunate that we have to look at it that way about next year. But, it's also, we aren't in a horrible spot as Easthampton. And part of that is kind of, to Casey's point about our arts community and our ability to rebound. Some of the things that he was talking about, they do tie into recovering from COVID, but there's also kind of an overall point here about, like, what is our identity? Like, what do people think about when they think about Easthampton, or they talk about Easthampton? And I wanted to make the point that there are other opportunities for the arts to collaborate with the Parks Department as well. The Parks Department already does several other events like the Harvest Fest, the citywide flea market. They do movie nights in the park. We have the Jubilation in every December. That's a toy drive. So there is some overlap there as well in terms of like promoting Easthampton and being a place, for community to come together.
I think Cassie hit the nail on the head. If we assume that coming out of next winter and coming into warmer weather, and we go on the assumption that we're still dealing with this in some way, shape, or form, COVID, how do we help the businesses adapt for that in April? So it's warmer in April, and to Jeff's point, parking lots, parking spaces, how are we going to help businesses adapt to that? And then as a sort of backdrop to that, at the same time, can there be planning for this big event that Casey's talking about, that when the day comes that everyone says we're in a COVID-free world, that we could launch this big event within a 90-day period, not a 2-year period. Yeah. And so Cassie hit the nail on the head, I think, the way she described it.
Maybe we can get a consultant study. What do you think, David?
I think we're the consultants. We
are the consultants.
We are.
No, I think one of the things that I think the arts are going to do what the arts do. You know what I mean? I just think that we need to look at them as an economic driving force, and they can stand on their own, or we can be aware of what they're doing and just try to make networks and connections to people or businesses that do want to be a part of it and help support it and make it a better success for what it is.
Great.
I like Chris's idea of art walk, maybe is more often, some sort of just general ideas and collections, getting the park, like Paul was talking about how much the park does, like maybe the park can do more because there's such an idyllic place to social distance. You know what I mean? It's like, I didn't think about the parks before, but now that he brings it up, yeah, that sounds like a no-brainer. So it's sort of just more connecting the dots, I think.
I think one of the things that...
Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, Cassie, sorry.
I would think that contingency planning would be good, though. So, like, you have Art Walk. That's, I think as I remember it, it's in the parking lot. So that's kind of a medium state like we are now. If we're back to March, you could have Art Drive. But in either case, get everything in order to roll it out for March. Just a thought.
Casey, do you have an idea of what a next step would be, some kind of action coming out of this conversation?
Not necessarily as much as the arts committee to sort of, like, their first thought was just to put out money to the artists because their income has been cut, right? And they've then sort of adjusted it to say, is this something that can be shared with the public? How do we make this socially viewable? And so now the next stage is going to be, well, what is the next stage? And I'm trying to say, like, can we focus on a great spring? So it's not like there's been a conversation about we want to do this or we see this as a solution. It's just starting to be an idea. We're trying to do a Windows project, which is a little slow going, but you'll start to see some of that stuff happen. I'm just thinking that if we could, like, line up series of things, like through the Parks Department or an art walk or city space, the mills, to be more proactive to educating the public of all the different things that happen. So it's really just starting right now. There's no momentum. There's no real concept. It's just, throwing darts.
I think that you really nailed the word you used was a series of events. I think that's really important because if Easthampton is thought of a place where something is always happening, as opposed to a one-off like cultural chaos, that will it'll be a good engine in the long term. Something that comes to mind is Food Truck Fridays. I think a lot of the success for Food Truck Fridays because it came from the fact that people knew they can go any Friday they wanted, and they did. It was a thing to do. It was an event. It wasn't a one-off, and I think that has some traction.
Yeah, and I think this is good, and I think it's just important. I think, and Casey is now the co-chair of the Easthampton the City Arts Coordinating Committee, which is going to be helpful to bridge the gap. I do want to say I think the terminology would be kind of to restart, or maybe even kind of revamp, because I am sensitive to the fact that there has been Art Walk, there has been events that are series of ongoings, and I think what happened is we hit giant pause button, and I think the idea is how do we unpause and kind of flash back. So because there's a public art subcommittee, so they talk about where and what kind of art gets installed and how it can be activating for areas. There's a art walk subcommittee, there's a cultural district subcommittee, so there are a lot of people who are thinking about the same thing, and so it's just making sure that we are collaborating and not reinventing wheels, because I sat through a couple of discussions about canceling Cultural Chaos this year, and I think it was a pretty painful decision. Ultimately, obviously, it was the right one, but the thing that stuck out to me was the group, even though there was so much pride about Cultural Chaos and how successful it is, the takeaway that I heard was they could come back with a series of smaller events and be more nimble and be able to be responding to what's going on. And I think kind of it's still taken a while to kind of come back, and I don't know that we're going to hit it in like August or September. But the idea of these artist grants, the last round the emphasis was, can you have your thing be outside, and can it be kind of engaging? And then we talked about kind of maybe positioning those people to do art on Cottage Street on Saturday night, so that in this last glimmer of fall, there's some things happening. But then I think the real emphasis should be kind of planning how do we relaunch all this stuff in the spring. So there's a lot of people thinking about this. So it's something where we just want to make sure that as small groups, we are harnessing all of that and not stepping on toes, but I think there's a lot of conversations about this happening.
Jeff, I would agree with you, except for one little thing. When you said, how do we relaunch all this stuff? How do we when do we hit the unpause button? And you said in the spring. The only issue is going to be, we don't know the when. We don't know if it'll be spring. We don't know if it'll be summer. We don't even know if it'll be 21. So I agree with you about relaunching all of those things were great for the city. Art Walk and Cultural Chaos, and all those things are great. I'd be more, again, I'm going back to something Cassie said, I'd be more concerned about concentrating on what can we do, maybe fall, maybe spring, to help businesses in a COVID world.
Yeah.
Dealing with what they're dealing with today. How do we help, these businesses? What is it we can do? Jumping off on Paul's original proposal, what can we do to be ready for next spring to say, we're going to help these businesses hit the ground running?
Yeah, Tom, just to add to that point, I didn't mean to be stepping on toes, Jeffrey, about doing different events. It was more about educating the public and this group, these owners, these experienced people, to say that the arts community is doing a lot of successful things. They have all the pieces in place. Can we just work more coordination, whether or not it's getting zoning issues with stuff, whether or not it's coordinating with the police department, like Paul did a ton of work. Can we use some of that work? Can we, It's like, can this organization help that other organization? That's really what I was talking about, was like, don't let the arts coordinating, the public arts groups be on an island. Let's work with them, just like we want to work with the housing committee. That's really what I'm trying to talk about here, is taking this resource of people to help make that better.
That makes sense. That's good.
It sounds like we have a standing agenda item then to talk about what we know is happening in the arts community, how the business community might be in support of that, how they can work closer together. And that is a role that we can play as a city committee, to have that be something that we talk about. And you're an incredible liaison in that way, Casey.
Agreed.
It's 5:10. I want to let you go. Is there anything else that is pressing on your brain that must come up today? Okay. So do I have a motion to close this meeting?
So moved.
I make a motion that we close this meeting.
Oh, great. So I'm going to count you both as a first and a second. All in favor, holler aye.
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 Thank
Great
you,
to see all of
everyone.
you. Thanks for your brains.
Thank you,
Jeffrey.
everybody.